Okay, so it's just coming up to 10 o'clock. So as always, we're going to start on time just to be respectful of everybody's day and everyone's time. Just some housekeeping before we start. Everyone is on mute. If you'd like to speak, please let me know. But if you just, I'm sure people will have loads of questions, and actually that's when the magic happens, is when our attendees have questions for the speaker. So please feel free to put them in the chat box. I will keep an eye on those and moderate them. But we'd love some questions from you. That would be great. But today on screen we have James Bishop and Imona from SiteMinder. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just, as always, I've got your little bio here because I'm never going to remember it, James, and I'm never going to do you the service that I deserve if I try and remember it. So I'm sure a lot of you already know James, but James began his career in the Ashdown Park Hotel, part of the elite hotel groups. And you understand, obviously, being a hoteler, the day-to-day challenges involved with managing and marketing in the hospitality world. In 2002, he transitioned into the dynamic space of hotel technology, worked with Soft Brands, which is now part of Infor, before moving to Excellent Hotel Systems and Acorn Hospitality. Today, James plays an instrumental role in the global hotel industry's leading guest acquisition platform, SiteMinder. Living out his passion, I love that word, passion for providing technology that empowers both hoteliers and technology innovators to find success online. Having led the diverse EMEA region sales team for many years, James now works with SiteMinder's ever-expanding global partnerships to drive demand for hotels worldwide. So again, I've said this many times, we're privileged, absolutely genuinely privileged to have such wonderful speakers. And James, you hold the record for the largest ever number of attendees. I think this morning it was sitting at 194, 196. So obviously people are very interested in what you have to say. So I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to let you kick off if you'd like to say anything. And I know you've got lots of content that you want to share today. So thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting SiteMinder to participate. I'm really pleased that that we're here and that we were able to get that level of attendee numbers. I know over the last 6 months or more, you know, I've always felt there might be a bit of fatigue by now, because we've done a lot of online meetings, but it's great to see that we're still being able to hopefully add value to those people who are joining. So yeah, thank you so much for having us here. I won't hold up too long. I will jump into a presentation I put together, and we'll certainly try and leave plenty of time at the end for those magic questions, as Adrian pointed out. So what we were talking today about is the changing world of distribution. Just looking to get some advice from myself, and to be honest, I look forward to the questions, as I said, just as much to hear your feedback in terms of how we can get the distribution strategy right as we go into this fairly interesting year of selling our hotels. So first thing I thought I'd do is just to have a quick run through the sort of 4 of the sort of major distribution categories that we're all working with, or we all should be working with on a day-to-day basis. Now, a hotel should be in a position to be able to dial up or down their strategy per distribution type, depending on how the market is playing out or where guests are likely to come from, both be it from a location or even a channel type. So just starting the top left there with Meta. So Meta includes players like Google, Trivago, and TripAdvisor. And these are some of the largest names in travel. So it's important as hotels and hoteliers that we're well positioned with these partners. And it's not as hard as it sounds. And I'll cover each of these in a little bit more detail further on the slide. I just really want to kind of frame what each of these, who these are as a basic before we start. And then you have OTAs. So OTA is often used as a collective for any channel that's connected to a channel manager. But personally, I think it's really important to differentiate between OTAs and other distribution types. So OTAs or online travel agents are a B2C operation. They are selling your room inventory directly to the traveler. And most importantly, they are all typically competing against each other for the same guest and competing against your direct channel. So the other category I've got up there is wholesalers. I've put in there and aggregators, and we'll go into aggregators just a little bit more later on. It's a kind of emerging trend, which I don't know what to really call yet. So I'm sticking with that for now. But wholesalers, these are a B2B model, which differs greatly from an OTA. So wholesalers are buying your hotel inventory and selling this along with other elements of travel. So they'll be selling a room with ground transportation or with experiences or with flights, but they're selling this along to other travel businesses who are selling to the travelers. So they're not selling to that end user who's going to end up in your hotel. And these types of business might be tour operators, airlines, offline travel agents, or smaller OTAs. And then finally, we've got probably the most important one there is the direct channel. So, and for most hotels, if not all hotels, this is the most important channel. So we will discuss direct or brand.com channel in more detail later on. But hopefully everyone here knows what direct is. But we'll have a look at what trends we've seen in the last year, what we can expect to see in 2021. How do we really measure success in direct and at what cost? But firstly, let's just take literally 2 minutes to talk about what a good distribution strategy looks like. And this is really based on the data of our hotels, 35,000 plus hotels on the platform. So we spend a lot of time seeing, looking at hotels and different types of hotels within our data to really understand what good looks like. And to be quite generic about it without drilling down to any specific hotel type, we'd say that the standard there is to have at minimum 5 channels connected. There's some argument internally whether that includes direct or excludes direct, but I would throw, whether it's 5 plus your direct channel or 5 distribution channels. But so you can see with that rather random looking graph on the right, the arrows, the numbers around the top indicate the number of channels that a hotel is on. And this is not the numbers up in the middle. These aren't representative of a particular number of reservations, or more just a scale. So you can see if you had one channel, you can see that you're receiving a lesser share of reservations. It jumps up at 2 to 3, but really it gets to its peak. I say the peak is obviously when you're up around here, but once you get to 5, incremental channels after that are making a difference, but not as much of a difference as you are between 1 and 5. And you'd be surprised, or you might not be, how many hotels we have on our platform with actually less channels than that, and really not making the most of the distribution that's available. The key, obviously, you don't just add the first 5 on the list, is to be quite selective about the channels that you're working with. Obviously, you've got your usual suspects, but then it's understanding what's my next best bet based on my property, the type of guest I'm looking for, and where I'm located. And to always balance a distribution strategy with your direct strategy. But when we talk about distribution, let's talk about actually maximizing distribution. So from those 4 categories we were looking at, I'll have a look a bit more detail now in Meta, distribution channels, and wholesalers. So as I said earlier, Meta is continuing to be a really important channel in the distribution mix. Some of the largest brands in the world, not just in the world of travel, are very, very visible in Meta, such as Google, TripAdvisor, Trivago. And it is actually easy. it's arguably the easiest and most effective way to compete directly with OTAs for the same guest. And that's an important distinction, because, realistically, we like to look at OTAs as being a channel for driving new business to our hotel. But once we know that guest and they are our guest, we'd like to think that any returning business is coming to us direct. So when we talk about competing with OTAs, we need to be competing with OTAs for that new guest rather than thinking we need to be competing with them for the return guest. But when you're on Meta, that's the easiest way to be effectively side by side with those OTAs who are bidding on those guest clicks. And really, that's, as I say, the guests that haven't experienced your brand yet. That said, it's also important to ensure that if you don't get all the important clicks through Meta or through or other advertising, whether that's advertising on Google outside of Meta, for example, that you still have an opportunity to get that guest through other channels. So what I'm talking about is, obviously, yes, let's make sure we're visible on Meta as a direct channel. So when a guest goes to Google Hotel Finder and they're searching for hotels in your area, you're going to show up, and you're going to show up as a direct booking, and you can be very competitive there. But obviously, let's make sure you're also showing up and you're well represented by your distribution partners, whether it's Booking or Expedia or someone else that's also bidding for that same click, because obviously visibility is king. And if you don't get that first click, then let's hope that you still get that guest, even if it's through another channel. And that's where it's really important, just moving on a little bit to the OTAs, to make sure that you're maximizing your potential with them. So OTAs will continue to play a big part in hotel arrivals through 2021. While there's been a big shift in the share to direct bookings since the start of COVID, this is mainly due to the change in the typical type of guest. And I can talk about that a little bit later on as we talk about the change of guests and what we've experienced in the last year. But as this swings back to look more like 2019 levels, and hopefully we start to see that uptick in the next sort of 6 to 9 months, with a steady increase, and start to, as events unfold, hopefully we start to see a more consistent type of increase in our occupancy and the number of reservations. But as that starts to swing back in 2019 levels, it's important to understand that, obviously, in order to get your share of those reservations, that we're working well with those OTAs. And that is really maximizing your potential within each of the channels that you're working with. And some of the key things that you can do there is ensure that you're giving availability. And it sounds like an easy thing, but there's one thing to say, look, I've given 5 rooms to that channel for the next 3 months, 6 months, therefore I should be seeing my share, versus actually, you know what, I'm giving as much inventory or I'm giving the same inventory to all of my channels, and I'm doing it for the next 2 years. Because yes, whilst the majority of our arrivals are going to happen, and we're seeing a much shorter lead time in reservations at the moment, so they're going to happen the next 3 months, and you feel like as long as I'm giving rooms in that period, I should be getting the reservations. It's the math that happens in the background which affects your positioning on each of those channels. And realistically, the more inventory that you're giving for the longer period, the better positioned you're going to be. It's exactly the same as the algorithms used in Google to see who's going to get that first page of Google. You have to be very aware of those and how you can work. I mean, they change all the time, but ensuring that you're putting your best foot forward, because something someone said to me last year is, where's the best place to hide a dead body? And the answer is the second page of Google, because no one ever looks there. And it's very similar to that OTA. If you're on that first page, you're going to see a much higher share of those clicks to your property page. And once you're seen, make sure you have the right rates. You've got a very competitive rates, and that you're offering multiple rates per room type. So if you're selling a room for 80 euros, then you need to also offer rates which are, maybe you have a room only, or which is on there at 65 or 70 euros, and you can have another rate for the same room on there at 90, 100 euros, because this is really impacted by the way that guests are searching for rooms. They will use filters, of course. I mean, we're all guests as well as hoteliers. And when I book a room, my first filter would be the review rating. So I start looking at anything with an 8 and above. So it's really important that, and this is pretty typical of many guests, right? That you're really focusing on those review ratings and making sure that, we're doing an outstanding job as hoteliers to make sure that we're getting the correct positioning for our hotel. But then the second would be your budget. Whether it's business or even in leisure, there's always a budget there, and people will filter on that rate. If as a guest in that hotel, in that example, I put in my budget being 90 to 110 euros per night. Now you've only put in a rate at 80 euros, but you could easily put in a 90 euro rate if it included additional value, be it whether it's a dinner, bed and breakfast rate rather than just a bed and breakfast rate. Alternatively, if my search went up to 75 euros, where your room's at 80 euros, but you could have done a room only rate at 70 euros, the increase in the times of your visibility in those searches is really important. Now, if you do that across all the channels that you're working on, your visibility increases greatly, and you get a much better chance of receiving those reservations. And then your profile. It's really important that we're maximizing optimizing the images that you have up there. Like, I've got snow covering the garden at the moment. If I was a hotelier and I was selling my rooms in winter, I would have more wintry images up. You can change your images per season. You can change your images whenever you like. You can update your descriptions, make sure your amenities are updated. If you've recently put Netflix in every room, that should definitely be in there, and becomes a selling point. And more importantly, a lot of the major OTAs have added functionality for you to indicate what you're doing around the safety of guests through COVID. And this is really important through the online channels, but just as important, or even more so important, through your direct channel, be it on your main website page and through your booking engine, to ensure that you've updated your content to give the guests that sense of safety, that that you have their best interests at heart once they've actually arrived at the hotel. And lastly, on OTAs, it's really then expanding that model that you have with those key partners and understanding the value of additional OTA partners or other distribution partners to really diversify your distribution, ensuring that your new partners are selling to varied guests. So when we talk about selling to varied guests, I mean, wholesalers is a good example of that. So whilst OTAs are typically all competing for the same guest, be that transient business or domestic leisure, wholesalers are working are typically selling to guests that are not searching online for hotels, right? So a wholesaler or B2B channels have a pretty large reach, and the wholesalers should be selling a discounted rate or packaged or opaque rate. So it's a really good way to increase occupancy on the hotel without actually lowering your public rates. So you might be selling publicly that same rate, 80 euros. You might give a 55 euro rate to a wholesaler, because that rate's never going to be visible. It's going to be packaged with a flight or travel or something else and sold on to a guest at the other end for 150 euros, but it's got a whole lot of other things, and they never see the value of that hotel element in there. That is the whole idea of an opaque rate through wholesalers. However, wholesalers have come under the microscope a bit with regards to the transparency and who is getting your rate, and is it always packaged. So, you know, you may well have seen with your own hotels, or you see channels that are bidding on you selling your rooms on Meta, and it may be a brand that you don't work directly with or that you don't really recognize as a partner, and they've got a really low rate. Now, there has been a practice in the past with wholesalers, you know, making available those rates and not ensuring that they're being packaged and sold with something else, and that's how those rates typically end up out there. So that has really brought about the and look, wholesalers, I know I spoke to them a lot last year or over the last 18 months about this, and they're doing a lot with their partner network, with their selling network, to really bolt down and ensure hotels against this. But you know, it isn't an easy task if they've got 35,000 people buying their rooms, different companies plugged in and buying that inventory. But there has developed an emerging trend in the last year or so, are those partners I'm calling aggregators or marketplaces, such as companies like Roibos, who are based out in Palma, or Hyperguest from Israel, but you know, very European focused. These platforms distribute B2B like a wholesaler, but they just allow you as a hotelier to have a lot more control over your rates, who can sell them, for example. So you can actually go in there and you can see the list of buyers, and you can say yes, 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 no, if you don't want a particular buyer to have your rate. And you can actually set up specific rates to specific buyers within that marketplace. It's a lot more transparent model for hotels to control their rates to the typical wholesale market. However, there is a supply and demand issue with those today, and you know, it will take time for those marketplaces to grow to have the same number of buyers or travel buyers that you would get from a major wholesaler. And again, on the supply side, for them to have directly contracted enough hotels to make them a really attractive alternative to a wholesaler. So it's very early days, but it's certainly something worth investigating.
James, do you mind if I just step in and ask you a couple of questions that were sent to me over the last couple of days? So one of them is, well, first couple are around Meta. Are there any Meta sites that you feel are doing better than others? Like, if you were going to concentrate, where should you concentrate at the moment? The second part of that question, I suppose that this was from a different person. Is Google Hotel Finder going to be the one that we have to watch in 2021? And then the third question is, what is the average cost of acquisition if you're getting a booking through Meta?
They are all great questions. So the first one, who are the partners that you should be working with Meta, and who? Well, I do honestly believe that Google is currently the sort of standout Meta partner. It's, you know, they are the go-to place for search, and that's what Meta is, right? Obviously, they haven't been playing in the space the same amount of time as a Kayak or a Trivago or a TripAdvisor, but they just have the benefit of traffic, right? So all they're doing as a search company is seeing all of this traffic, understanding the searches that they're doing, and seeing how they can, you know, capitalize on that search, right? This is their business, and they obviously see a lot of search traffic. Now they have to weigh up that between, okay, look, I'm going to cannibalize the revenue I'm getting a little bit from Booking.com and Expedia, who spend billions a year on click marketing with Google, but obviously I think that the Meta route is a much more transparent way, and it does enable hotels to compete more directly. So in terms of which partner, is Google going to be the one to look out for in 2021? Yes, it's certainly one that you should work with. But at the same time, I feel that multiple meta, you should be visible on multiple meta sites as a direct hotel, as brand.com. And if we talk about Europe, I think the top two would be Google and Trivago, and very closely followed by TripAdvisor. There was a third part to that question.
Yeah, well, actually, we've just got another one in as well. So the third part to my question was, what is the average cost of acquisition through a meta site?
Cool. It's what you're willing to pay in many cases. And it's very difficult to say what that cost is, and it very depends on what sort of and how you're entering into that meta search environment. So you could go with your direct booking engine provider. Many of them will have meta as an option included. I mean, I can talk about how SiteMinder do it. So we do it on a cost per acquisition. So we just agree on a percentage that you pay for stayed reservations, in which case you know exactly what the cost is going to be, and you're only paying when you actually have a stayed reservation, which is very different to if you're going through a marketing agency kind of route, or if you're bidding directly with those channels where you actually create a campaign and you put 5,000 or 1,000 euros in terms of clicks, and then you create campaigns to say what type of guests I want to bid for, and when I want to bid for them, and based on your availability. Takes a lot more management from a hotel perspective, but it's risk reward, right? You'll put more effort into it in that way. If you're doing it yourself, or it'll cost you a certain amount if you're using a digital marketing agency, and it is risk reward. I've seen through Meta's cost of acquisition. Okay, if you're talking about just the click costs, not talking about marketing agency costs, I see them as low as 8 to 9%. But then at the same time, I've seen campaigns where people are actually paying twice as much for their direct through Meta than there are for a typical OTA reservation. And quite regularly you see reservations where the cost of clicks is really translated to a cost of 20 to 25% for that direct reservation. But you can see it as low as 4%. And it does depend on what type of hotel you are, where you're located, what sort of resources you've got. If you have someone dedicated to this who is maybe digital marketing expert, more so than me, then hopefully you'll be able to drive a much lower cost of acquisition. If you just want to make sure you're visible, a cost per acquisition model is a very good opportunity. And it allows you to manage multiple channels in a single place. For example, TripAdvisor, again, the cost per click there is much more of a, where you manage your own campaigns. But I think, TripAdvisor is certainly going to be one to watch this year as well. They've done a lot of work in the last year or so, releasing new packages into the market, whether it's about reputation management or anything else, but they've really got the bit between their teeth.
Okay, really interesting. And I think that's something that I find when we work with hotels is they don't always understand that getting a direct booking, we all know that we want that business, but there is an associated cost with that. It's just not the commission, it's everything else. And you really need to look at the data and to understand that. And the final, I promise you, the final, will let you move on, James. Sorry, really interesting. I can always rely on my wonderful friend, Altaf from Limerick, to ask the question. He's brilliant. So his question is, when do you think the Google booking engine will become live and become competition to a hotel rather than a facilitator?
It's a good question, and I think they're going to be a facilitator for a longer time to come than you can imagine. There's one thing that Google doesn't do well, and that is working with consumers. right? They're great B2B. They're great at search, but they do not want to be having that direct conversation with your guests when there's a double booking or what have you. Like, I find that hard to see, to be honest, without them actually acquiring an existing brand that's already up and running. But I don't know what's attractive to them out there. But actually working directly with consumers and having that entire ecosystem, like globally, to be able to do that. I think they're a search company, and I think certainly for the foreseeable future they're going to remain that way.
Perfect. I promise I won't ask you anything else, James. I'll let you.
That's all I know. I'm open to it.
I have actually a list here, don't worry, so go ahead.
Okay. So I was just going to finish up that kind of wrap up on the distribution strategy, just with a slide focusing on direct. But we've spoken a lot about it, so I won't overdo it. It's still the most important channel to most hotels, and quite rightly so. And to be honest, we covered a lot of this. Hey, but don't be fooled. These reservations are not necessarily free, and in many cases they're not even cheaper than what you would pay through an OTA. It just depends on how you do the maths and what you include in that cost, because you have a technology cost, you have a marketing cost, you're paying for digital clicks, whether that's through Meta, because they effectively fall under direct in some cases, most cases really. You have the cost of managing that reservation, whether it's cancellations, whether it's modifications, whether it's anything else. So it's weighing up the value between how much I'm going to invest in my direct versus what is the value of that direct reservation. And they are obviously higher, not only just by numbers, but emotionally the value of a direct reservation is a lot higher. But typically they have a higher revenue per room night. They spend more when they're actually at the hotel, and the whole reason is because they tend to be domestic leisure guests. Like, your direct channel is very much attractive to domestic leisure guests. They just have more of a tendency to book that way than, say, international business booking direct through your own website. But ignoring like the brand.com of Marriott and Hilton, where they have loyalty and like the airline package and so on, which really drives that direct business. If I'm talking about what I expect we're talking to today is independent European hotels. That's the picture of today. But doing the basics for your direct booking and putting your best foot forward doesn't cost you anything. They seem like really simple points, but ensuring that your website, and not just your website, but your mobile booking engine is mobile optimized, that you're working with a partner, or be it a technology partner or a digital marketing company that really knows that space and has your best interests at heart. And then it's not a closed system. Work with a partner where you can actually bolt on extras. If you suddenly think, you know what, I think a chatbot on my website or on my booking engine is going to improve the conversion, because when a guest's there and they have a question, they can literally type it into the chatbot. And if the chatbot can't answer it, my front desk can answer it straight away. Then make sure you're working with a booking engine that says, hey, look, you can integrate conversion tools, you can integrate loyalty packages, you can integrate chatbots into your booking engine, or you can take them out again. And it's not going to cost you guys to experiment, because one of the key things is to do that A/B testing, to experiment with something, see what difference it makes, and then decide whether you're going to implement it long term. Don't prioritize your style over conversion. And that's really important booking engine providers are very good at this in terms of making sure that the booking engine does look good, but functionally it's all about conversion, versus you go off to have your website built and you've got all these flashy images and all the rest of it, but actually, the CTA, the call to action, isn't effective in the right places, and you're not actually driving traffic to your booking engine, but you're just showcasing a really nice building, you know, is not the best foot forward. So sometimes it's like, well, actually, this website isn't the singing or dancing, beautiful looking thing that I thought I wanted, but the job of the website is a shop front, is to drive people into your booking engine and to get them to convert. And that really is the most important thing you can do on your direct channel. So changing up slightly, we'll have a look at very quickly how has the distribution landscape changed in the past year. So in the last year, or at least since April, due to the changing type and behavior of our guests, we've witnessed some pretty big changes. Interestingly, each year SiteMinder releases a top 12 distribution channels per market. Sadly, this isn't out yet. This is actually due out early next month. Shameful plug, but I would encourage you to go and have a look at that when it does come out, because I've seen a lot of the data, and I think there's some very interesting things coming out, which I'd love to be able to share with you guys, but hopefully have a look at it. And if you have any questions, speak to anyone at SiteMinder and they can talk about that. But yeah, I can already tell you that we've seen more changes this year than we've ever seen on previous years. Some of the other things we've witnessed since, say, April onwards, no surprises, much shorter lead time and reservations. Guests are waiting longer to book until they're more confident their plans will go ahead. We've also seen longer length of stays. So with that shift to domestic leisure, whereas typically, you know, there might be a shorter length of stay, we're actually seeing leisure weekends are turning into longer stays and mini breaks. International option is off the table. Guests are traveling locally, but they're also traveling more frequently. So they might do 3 or 4 trips, given, you know, restrictions allowing, for 4 nights, as opposed to that 2-week holiday in the summer. Non-refundable bookings, pretty much a thing of the past, right? I would say, I wouldn't even go as far as saying have a non-refundable booking today. I wouldn't take it away, but I wouldn't bank on it. Like, the vast majority of the reservations are coming through flexible rates, and we have to be as flexible as possible. And displaying that flexibility wherever you're selling your rooms, be it direct, be it through your channels, is really important. We're seeing a lot of different channels being used, or at least you know, hitting those top 10, top 12 in each market. We see a decrease, obviously, in GDS with the lack of business travel, but you know, the domestic leisure channels very much increased. And of course, the share of direct reservations increased magnificently in that period. And that's not an it's not an understatement. It's it was quite big, but we didn't see more direct reservations, I don't believe, certainly per hotel. No hotel standing out and said, I did more direct last year in terms of number of room nights or number of reservations than I did the year before. But what certainly, in terms of the share of the number of the reservations, whether it came through third party, whether it came through group or my direct website channel, that share increased a lot. But the reason for that is, how I see it, it's not so much an increase of guests, it's purely because of the lack of international travel, which takes up a lot of those OTA or wholesale reservations that would typically come through. But that's not to say we can't look to capitalize on that further this year. And finally, we saw a lot of hope, or at least hope for international travel, because as well as the shorter lead time on reservations, we're actually seeing international bookings for this summer and all the way out through to 2022. I was going to put a picture in here on a slide deck, but actually you can go and have a look yourself. We released a lot of this data publicly in April last year. So if you look at SiteMinder website for the SiteMinder World Hotel Index, it's free to use. You can type in your country. If we have your city data, it's in there. You can see where those reservations are coming over the last 2 weeks or what's on the books and so on.
Thank you very much. So I can just jump in there and say Amon has very kindly put that link into the chat box.
Oh, excellent.
So it's there. I had a look at it a few days ago when you and I first spoke. So it's a really useful tool, guys, if anyone wants to jump on. And just hitting on some of the things that you said there, James. We moderate a WhatsApp group for hoteliers, and I shared this morning from FocusWire, just reiterating what you're saying. As we know, departure dates so booking to departures is much closer than ever. Flexibility is key, which is exactly what you've just said. Interestingly, 9 out of 10 people are prepared to travel domestic within the next year. So we have that, as we've coined the phrase, that reluctant staycationer for some time to come. But interestingly, I thought 73% of Europeans feel that they will be travelling by July 2021. So hopefully there is hope around the corner. But I think the big thing I took away from that report as well, the period between booking and stay is really crucial. So guests want you to communicate relevant information. They want to know that their booking is, and they can cancel it, that they've got flexibility, and that they're going to be safe, and what your procedures are. So again, maybe looking if you were looking to invest, there might be some good reasons there for investing in some guest communication technology. And as always, someone in my team actually described to me yesterday that we are a revenue management software company with a consultancy hangover, and I think that's probably right. So thanks for that, George, because we do stay very close to our customers and we do get asked for advice. So if anyone would like any information on anything you've talked to, I know that you've got information today on SiteMinder, but on anything about booking channels or anything like that, or guest communication, just give me a shout. We're very happy to share some of the industry experts that we've worked with along the way. Oh yeah, sorry, I missed this statistic on the UK prepared to travel domestically. It was 9 out of 10 people, Liz. So yeah, 9 out of 10 people are planning to travel within their own country within the next year, which I thought was really interesting. So sorry, James, I didn't mean to step over you there. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, appreciate it. Really, really good input and very relevant, obviously, to what we're talking about. I know we spoke briefly about that before the call, and I hadn't seen it, so no, I really appreciate you highlighting that. And it's good that it kind of ratifies what we're talking about anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
So one of the other questions that we get often and that we spoke about for this presentation was, who are the dominant players looking to come out on top in 2021? And I'll tell you who deserves to come out on top in 2021, and it's hotels. And it's hotels and our hospitality industry. We've been through the mill in the last year, and now with some light at the end of a fairly long tunnel, and I don't want to cast any aspersions as to how long that tunnel is. It's key to understand which partners are really going to help us to drive the recovery and setting ourselves up for success with them. As I might have mentioned previously, we'll have more information on that hopefully in the next week or so in our annual report. However, it should come as no surprise that the usual suspects are still providing the most reservations in the majority of regions. And so in no particular order, they would be obviously Direct, Booking, and Expedia. But I would certainly include Meta in there as part of that direct strategy, as being one of the more dominant players that I'd expect to see in 2021, which is a good thing for us because we have that opportunity to play directly with them and to use them as part of our own strategy for direct reservations. However, look, don't rule out Airbnb. They started 3 years ago in February, actually. Was when they first integrated with SiteMinder as their first sort of foray into working with more traditional accommodation partners, I call them, so hotels, hostels, service apartments, and what have you. and in those 3 years, they've had quite a journey, and since their IPO in December with a strong share price, they're currently valued higher than the other two largest players in this space. In fact, if you add up the market cap of Booking and Expedia, it doesn't reach the market cap today on the shares as of this morning for Airbnb. So they have, I would suspect, quite a war chest of investment that will go towards growing their business, and hotels and transactions for hotels are still a big part of that. I've definitely seen an increase in that business, not just because they are pretty synonymous to vacations or domestic travel, because one of the things they do really well, which would serve hotels well, is that, again, and it's all about finding sources of new guests. They don't compete in the same way with Booking and Expedia for their reservations. The vast majority of the traffic to Airbnb platform is direct, as in people don't go to Google, look for a place to stay, then click on Airbnb. They go straight to Airbnb. And if they're going straight to Airbnb, they're not seeing Meta, they're not seeing Google, you're not going to get a chance to advertise for them, and they're not going to see Booking.com and Expedia. They're going directly to that platform, and they get a lot more of that type of traffic, which is valuable to them in the same way it's valuable for a hotel in direct traffic than other channels. They have a very strong brand, and they have a very loyal following of guests. And when people think about, if you are a loyal Airbnb user, that is your go-to place. So it's very important that, all of those things put together, that I think that hotels are as visible as they can be with a platform that's growing like that. So as we're getting towards the tail end, how has customer behavior changed? In the last year, SiteMinder released some content around the 5 stages of the booking reset, and this is based on the behavior of travelers that we've witnessed since April, along with the booking trends we've seen, or what we expect to see. And I'll give you a very brief overview of that. I'm sure Ramon has also probably stuck another link in the chat for you guys where you can actually grab that content. But we basically broke it down to 5 stages. And you can see there I don't know if my arrow says, so you got this, the line, the big black line across the bottom, where you can see that's basically what we're talking about is our occupancy levels, or the booking levels within the market. And you can probably recognize this from some of your own reports that come out of your PMS. The first stage really being domestic acceleration, following the initial slump in demand, and when we hit the lowest ever recorded levels. This is the start of a recovery. Basically at this point, international borders are closed, and potentially there are additional restrictions on traveling domestically between regions. And the first stage is really that lift in domestic acceleration. But then you get to a plateau, which is basically where you have a renewed interest in local or domestic travel, and has driven the initial recovery period. But with a lack of group business and international travel, there's a limit to how much you can do. Like, it's pure supply. There just isn't enough demand to get us back to another level. Then you have really, flux. So in this stage, and we've probably witnessed this since about the end of September, after that summer period where you get that we've had that natural sort of demand through the fact that people are traveling locally. We haven't had the business travel, we haven't really had the group business and everything else. So we've been in a state of up and down, and it changes depending on whether there's restrictions in one country or our own country, or in different regions, or if we're in tier 4, tier 5, tier 7. And it's very unpredictable period. And I should say, at any point, and we've seen this, you can go back to a previous stage or all the way back to the beginning, which in the UK I suspect we are at the moment. But then, at least we have the advantage of knowing what's coming, and we've been there before. Whereas, in March, April last year, we had no experience of this at all. So, we're going to know what we did right last year to start driving the right business, and then we can bring it back. But the pieces that we're looking forward to getting to, where we start embracing, this is the stage where hoteliers and travelers are becoming more confident in recovery. Booking patterns will hopefully become less erratic. We'll see a return of domestic business travel and even start to see some international travelers. And then the final part would be international acceleration, where an increase in international bookings following an ease of restrictions for travelers from one or many countries. We'll still see last minute bookings being a trend. However, with an increase in bookings with longer lead times, traveler confidence is higher as COVID-19 cases drop both domestically and internationally. And realistically, that's where we're talking about having some level of immunity through vaccination, when we can start opening up that full international travel again. But right now in UK and Ireland and across much of Europe, we're probably between the first and second stages, or, depending on where you're located, you'll be in one of those. We do have the benefit of having seen this before, as I said, and we have, promising vaccine programs in multiple countries, which is starting to give traveler confidence, at least towards the summer or, the last quarter of 2021, which Adrian really pointed to there, from that data. And last slide, I promise.
Just 1 wee second. Sorry.
Yes, no, of course.
Only because there's been a really good question, and I think it just ties in with what you've just said there. When do you think we will expect us, as in Europeans, traveling back to the USA and Canada?
That's a really good question. And realistically, I think that when both countries have hit a level of immunity through vaccine programs, is when we can confidently start predicting travel, or where we can confidently say that we'll be able to travel. I did read one piece recently saying that, for international travel to resume, obviously the nation you're leaving from and the nation that you're going to would need to be at about 70% vaccine, like immunity through vaccines, in order to fully open up that travel. I suspect that we'll start seeing travel open up sooner. Economically, there's going to be a lot of demand for it. We're going to want the events industry to start again. I want to go to some events. I want to see other people, but so there will certainly be pressure on that to happen sooner. But
yeah, we've just got another one. Part of that, really, do we think that it's going to be 2 years before the industry's back on its feet again? I hope not. I really do. I'm one of those people that tries to keep their glass half full and hope that there's going to be lots of pent-up demand. And my own personal predictions are that as soon as we're allowed to open, the remainder of this year is going to be very strong, especially for those sort of out of city locations. I don't know how you feel about that, James.
Okay, so a personal opinion. I'm less optimistic about most of this year, but I am really optimistic about 2022. So I don't think it's going to be another 2 years, but I think we're going to have 2 years of fairly decent levels of pain since sort of last March. Before, if we're talking about 2019 levels of occupancy and reservations, but I think we're going to start to being well on our way there by, hopefully the last quarter of this year is when we're going to start to be able to predict and forecast really properly the business for the next sort of 3 to 6 months after that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, James.
That's all right. I believe this is my last slide anyway. So, and it's really much a summary of what we spoke through. The trend of last minute bookings is true. It's more of a reminder slide, so or more true than ever before. There is a growing divide between the urban areas and regional towns, and that's an interesting mix that we haven't seen before. Like historically, our major cities and destinations have always fared well through economic downturns. Actually, in this scenario, it's been very much the other way around, where our more rural locations and anywhere within a 90-minute drive of a major destination has been seeing a majority of that local domestic travel, which has been an interesting observation. Travelers are demanding greater flexibility. We spoke about that, and that's been obviously compounded and ratified by the article from Focus Wire as well today. And I think most importantly, there is still a desire to spend time away during established holidays. And I think that's something that, when we're planning, we should certainly be planning for that. I see spikes, even in the UK data, there's a spike there for the 14th of February, like people think they're going away for Valentine's Day, which I think is optimistic, but certainly we should be looking at those Easter breaks. I think there'll be pressure to have some sort of ability to travel through that period. And then on to the summer. And I expect a very similar summer to last year, where we'll see a lot of last minute reservations. We're going to see peaks of occupancy in those typical domestic leisure destinations. But hopefully we won't see the same drop off we saw in the autumn of 2020 when we get into September this year. That's I think that brings us on to questions. Apologies, we didn't leave the 20 minutes we wanted, but we have had some questions we've got in there. But I'll open this up to Adrian or any other questions that came through. But if we don't have time for them all, I welcome anyone to get in touch with me directly. Best place is LinkedIn, and you can find me there.
We've got one more here from Nicholas. What can secondary destinations and rural destinations do to stimulate growth? Or should they be focused on optimizing revenue based on current demand?
Sorry, which types of destinations?
Secondary destinations, rural destinations. How can they sort of stimulate growth, or should they be focused on looking at their current demand and optimizing revenue there?
No, I think, to be honest, the secondary destinations are actually in a stronger position than others. I mean, realistically, the vast majority of the population, if I looked at a London or a Dublin, are in those major cities, and the demand is really for them to be able to get out and have those short breaks. So it really is about those short domestic breaks. So there's definitely opportunity there. Again, if we're talking online or through distribution, then make sure you're advertising in the right place, the places where people are looking for short leisure domestic breaks. Airbnb is a great channel for that, even if you're not vacation rental. That channel is pretty much aligned with that type of travel, and your key channels. But again, your messaging on your direct website, make sure that you are attractive to that sort of thing. It's like when you buy anything, and I'm terrible at it, but even when I bought a dishwasher once, I even found myself going to the direct manufacturers. They can't even buy it direct from them. They should have done, because I spent time on their website and I wanted to know all about this dishwasher. And then I had to go back to a website and buy it from someone else. Everyone's going to hit your website. A lot of people will view your website, and if you have the right messaging there, then you're going to be able to drive that direct.
Well, James, thank you very much. We are almost out of time, but it's been such an interesting session. And for those of you who are maybe joining us for the first time, we have been running this revenue series before Christmas. We continue to run weekly sessions, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the speakers in a second. But what we do have is a very strict no pitching rule. So anyone who's speaking, doesn't go into their product a lot, which thank you very much, James. What you have focused on there is total education, giving everyone sort of key takeaways to take away, and some amazing insights into the future and into distribution in general. And just before we wrap up, as a thank you, and I honestly mean it's an absolute privilege to have you take part, so thank you so much. But is there anything just in SiteMinder that's coming up? I know that you said that your report is coming up, but is there anything that you'd like to just talk to us about that you think is interesting coming up in your world?
I wish I could talk about the things that I thought were interesting coming up in our world. I wish I could talk more about them, but look, we're set for a pretty exciting year. I would certainly encourage you guys to just check out our content on the website, and if you subscribe to our blog and our newsletters, you'll certainly receive that content. Or if you follow us on LinkedIn, is always a good way, or other social media is available. You know, to receive that content. So we've got some great stuff coming out around the top 12 booking channels. You can even go back and have a look at last year's and the years before and see how that's changed up until now. But yeah, look, I just thank you. Thank you, Right Revenue and Adrian, for the opportunity. It's been a real pleasure to be here and to speak with you all. And you know, we've got some, as I said, great content and hopefully some great product coming out later in the year. So as long as you're subscribed to us, then you'll be able to find it all there.
Well, again, thank you so much. We've got some lovely feedback coming into the little chat box there, James, so thank you for that. So as I say, every Tuesday for the next 5 weeks, this is series 2, and what we wanted to do was focus on really useful practical tips that we could deliver to you as hoteliers, really so that you can get revenue ready. So we've got the wonderful Thibaut Catala next week coming on to talk about how food and beverage revenue affects your property. We've got Kat McLeod talking to us about GDS and what the future might look like for that. We've got the amazing, I've got a little bit of a revenue crush on Heather Hart, because she's just phenomenal about meetings and events revenue and where that might go in the future. And then we've got Ciara Crossan from Wedding Dates talking about the changing needs of bride and groom. So a really practical 5 weeks this time. So we'd urge you, if you can, join us next Tuesday. Sign up for those, and if possible try and get your operational teams involved, because I think there's going to be a lot going on there. So again, James, thank you so much. We're going to let you go now. We've taken up more than an hour of your time, so thank you so much. And as James said, please do contact James and Amona if you need anything from SiteMinder. They're just the data that you have in the industry is phenomenal. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.